The Golden Age of Piracy. At the end of the 15th and beginning of the 16th centuries, Spain became the greatest power in Europe. After Columbus' discoveries and the conquests of Cortés and Pizarro, enormous wealth flowed into the metropolis. Gold and silver from Mexico and Peru were loaded onto galleons and caravels, which sailed to Seville and Cadiz. Every year, the Spanish organized this silver fleet, convoys of heavy ships loaded with ingots, jewels, and exotic goods. This was the heart of the Spanish economy. But such wealth could not go unnoticed. England, France, and Holland looked at Spain with envy and hatred. Religious wars began, Protestants against Catholics. For Spain's enemies, attacks on its ships and colonies became a means of warfare. This is how privateers were born, sea robbers who received a license from the king. Their task was to rob the Spanish. Formally, they were private entrepreneurs of war. The license gave them status, and the spoils were shared with the treasury. The first to become famous were the French, the flibustiers, from the word fribistier. They were based in the Caribbean islands, especially Tortuga. The first pirate republics arose there. England also put forward its heroes. Sir Francis Drake became the Spaniards' nightmare. He made daring raids on Panama, circumnavigated the globe, plundering Spanish cities and ships. The Spanish tried to defend their fleets. They built fortresses in Havana, Santo Domingo, and Cartagena. But the ocean was too vast, and pirates always found a way to strike where they were least expected. Thus began an era that would go down in history as the Golden Age of Piracy. In the 17th century, the Caribbean became an arena for conflict between European powers. Spain owned the largest colonies and considered the ocean its private highway. But England, France, and Holland did not recognize these claims. Their captains sought easy prey, and every Spanish galleon was a temptation for them. Tortuga, the cradle of buccaneers. In the north of Hispaniola was the small island of Tortuga. Its bays were convenient for mooring, and the mountains protected it from attack. In the 1620s, runaway sailors, adventurers, and hunters began to flock here. They lived by hunting wild boars and bulls, smoking meat on wooden grills called buccaneers. This is how they got their name. Soon, hunting turned into piracy. A community of people who did not recognize the laws of empires arose on Tortuga. French, English, Dutch, and even former Spanish deserters gathered here. Gradually, the buccaneers organized their own government. They elected a governor, built fortifications, and lived by their own laws. The island became a base from which expeditions were launched against Spanish galleons and coastal cities. The life of pirates. The buccaneers lived in communities. The spoils were divided according to the pirate code. Everyone received a share, the captain got more, the rank and file got less, but it was fair. Injuries were compensated with silver. If you lost an arm or an eye, you received payment. It was a prototype of social insurance. Decisions were made at councils. Everyone had a vote. Democracy on deck coexisted with the strictest discipline in battle. Alcohol, gambling, and fighting were commonplace. But discipline reigned during sea voyages. Theft or cowardice could get you thrown overboard. First raids. The buccaneers attacked Spanish ships and landed in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the coast of Mexico. Their success was due to their audacity. Small ships with dozens of men could attack a huge galleon because they acted suddenly and knew the coastal waters better than the Spaniards. The Spanish responded with caravans and convoys, but the ocean was too vast. Every galleon carrying gold became a coveted prize. England and Jamaica. In 1655, the English captured the island of Jamaica from Spain. It became a base for English privateers. London issued licenses for plunder, letters of marque. The captains shared their spoils with the crown, but in fact behaved like pirates. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica quickly became the pirate capital. It had everything: taverns, brothels, slave markets, and markets for looted goods. Contemporaries called it the most sinful city in the world. From here, privateers raided Cuba, Panama, and Mexico. One of the most famous was Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan, king of the buccaneers. Morgan was born in Wales and arrived in the Caribbean as a simple soldier. But his talent and cruelty made him a leader. In the 1660s and 1670s, he led raids that shook the entire Spanish world. His most famous feat was the campaign against Panama in 1671. With an army of 2,000 pirates, he crossed the jungle, attacked the richest city in the New World, and plundered it. Spain was furious, but England turned a blind eye. Moreover, Morgan was later knighted and appointed vice-governor of Jamaica. The pirate became an official, a vivid symbol of how privateering was part of politics. The Pirate Republic. By the middle of the 17th century, Tortuga, Jamaica, and the Bahamas had become a kind of pirate federation. Pirates of different nations cooperated, shared their spoils, but could also fight each other. They had their own code, their own laws, their own heroes. They lived outside of conventional society, but created their own. It was the dawn of the Golden Age. Ahead of them lay new exploits and new names. Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Bonnie, and Mary Red. And Bonnie was born in Ireland, grew up in Jamaica, and ran away with the pirate Jack Rackham. She wore men's clothing and was skilled with a sword and pistols. Mary Read hid her gender from childhood, pretending to be a man and serving as a soldier. Fate brought her together with and Bonnie aboard the Calico Jack. Contemporaries wrote that both fought fiercer than many men. When Rackham's ship was captured, almost all the pirates hid in the hold, while Anne and Mary fought on the deck until the end. Nassau and the Pirate Republic. After the destruction of Port Royal, the center of piracy moved to the Bahamas. A pirate republic arose on the island of New Providence, in the city of Nassau. Hundreds of pirates gathered here in the early 18th century. They lived by their own laws, elected governors, divided the spoils, and kept merchant ships throughout the region in fear. For some time, England turned a blind eye to what was happening because the pirates were interfering with the Spanish and French. But soon their power became too dangerous. By the beginning of the 18th century, piracy in the Caribbean had reached its peak. Hundreds of ships flying black flags plied the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Nassau in the Bahamas became the de facto capital of the free captains. But it was at this very moment that their era began to decline. Reasons for the decline. The main reason was that the great powers of Europe no longer needed pirates. During wars, such as the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, England, France, and Holland willingly used the services of privateers. But after the signing of the Treaty of Utrecht, pirates became a burden. Trade was growing, colonies were strengthening, and the chaos created by the buccaneers was hindering the empires. Now London and Paris decided to restore order. The hunt for pirates. In 1718, the British Crown appointed former pirate Woodes Rogers as governor of the Bahamas. His motto became, "Ex pirates, ex pirata." Once a pirate, always a pirate. Rogers arrived in Nassau with a squadron and an ultimatum: amnesty for those who surrendered and death for those who continued. Hundreds of pirates chose to surrender and receive forgiveness. But many did not believe the promises and went to sea. Then a systematic hunt began. Warships patrolled the Caribbean. Anyone caught under the black flag was hanged without trial. The death of legends. Blackbeard fell in 1718 in a battle off the coast of North Carolina. His head, nailed to the bow of the ship, became a symbol of the end of pirate romance. Calico Jack was hanged in 1720 along with part of his crew. Only Bonnie and Mary Red escaped the gallows. Both were pregnant. Mary died in prison and then disappeared from the chronicles. Her fate is shrouded in mystery. Charles Vane, one of Nassau's most daring captains, was captured and hanged in 1721. His execution was an event. Crowds of people watched as the Pirate King became a legend. The end of Nassau. The Pirate Republic in the Bahamas lasted only a few years, but went down in history as a unique phenomenon. There were no monarchs or officials, power was elected, and the spoils were divided equally. But it could not withstand the empires. After Rogers arrived, Nassau became a colonial port. Pirate democracy disappeared, giving way to the authority of the crown. The fate of pirates in the Indian Ocean. At the same time, English and French pirates were operating off the coasts of India and Africa. The most famous was William Kidd, who was initially welcomed in England as a privateer, but was later accused of piracy and hanged. There were entire pirate bases in Madagascar, where ships were repaired and supplied. But even there, the hunt by the empires led to their decline. The end of an era. By the 1730s, the Golden Age of Piracy had effectively ended. Spanish galleons still sailed across the Atlantic, but now they were protected by squadrons. England and France turned the Caribbean into their colonies. Piracy did not disappear completely, but it ceased to be a mass phenomenon. Legends about Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, and Bonny, and others remained, but real life returned to the laws of empires. Although the Golden Age was over, the legacy of pirates lives on to this day. Code. The rules for dividing the spoils and democracy on ships became a symbol of freedom and equality. Flag. The Jolly Roger, a skull and crossbones, is still associated with rebellion against authority. Mythology. Rum, chests of gold, treasure maps, parrots on shoulders. All of this came from real descriptions. Romance. Robert Stevenson's books, pirate movies, and legends of the Caribbean Sea have made this era eternal in culture. Piracy in the Caribbean gave the world a whole gallery of figures who were legends during their lifetime and became heroes of novels and songs after their death. Their names have survived the centuries. Henry Morgan, William Kidd, Charles Vane, and Bonny, and Mary Red. Each of them is worth considering separately to understand why their image lives on to this day. Henry Morgan, the pirate who became a governor. Henry Morgan was born in Wales around 1635. His youth is shrouded in mystery, but it is known that he ended up in Barbados and served in the English expedition against the Spanish. By the 1660s, he was already a captain and then one of the leaders of the buccaneers. His ships were based in Jamaica, and each expedition brought England rich spoils. The most daring expedition was to Panama in 1671. Morgan gathered about 2,000 pirates and marched through jungles teeming with snakes, insects, and diseases. When his army stormed Panama, the city burned for 3 days. Spanish chroniclers described the massacre, looting, and torture. And yet Morgan escaped punishment. In England, he was considered a hero because he weakened Spain. Moreover, he received a noble title and became vice-governor of Jamaica. Morgan died a rich man in 1688. He went from being a pirate to a civil servant, a rare example of a robber becoming part of the empire. William Kidd, a pirate by necessity. Captain Kidd's story is unusual. He was a Scotsman, an honest sailor and privateer who received a license from the English government to hunt Frenchmen and pirates in the Indian Ocean. But luck turned to misfortune. His crew, dissatisfied with the small amount of loot, mutinied. In 1698, Kidd captured the ship Quatach Merchant, which belonged to an Indian merchant. The loot was enormous: fabrics, gold, silver. But this ship was under the protection of the Mughal Empire, an ally of England. A scandal erupted in London. Kidd was accused of piracy. He returned, hoping to clear his name, but was arrested. In 1701, he was hanged, and his body was left hanging in an iron cage on the banks of the Thames to scare off other pirates. Since then, his name has been surrounded by legends about Captain Kidd's treasure. The treasure was sought in the Caribbean, New England, and Madagascar. And although most of the stories are myths, chests of coins attributed to Kidd are still found from time to time. Charles Vane, the rebellious rebel. Charles Vane was one of the most daring pirates of the early 18th century. He operated from a base in Nassau and was famous for his cruelty and stubbornness. Unlike many other captains, Vane rarely agreed to amnesty. He hated authority and preferred to die rather than submit. In 1718, when Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau with amnesty, Vane refused. He gathered his supporters and continued to plunder. His ships attacked merchant vessels off the coasts of Carolina and Cuba. His fame was cemented by a battle with a British squadron. Vane refused to surrender, fought his way through the enemy, and escaped. But luck does not last forever. Soon, part of his crew mutinied and chose a new captain. Vane himself ended up on a small sloop. He tried to return to piracy, but a storm washed him ashore in Jamaica. There he was recognized and handed over to the authorities. In 1721, Vane was hanged in Port Royal. His death became a symbol of the end of freedom. And Bonny and Mary Red, female pirates. The story of Bonny and Mary Read became legendary because women rarely appeared in the annals of piracy. And was born in Ireland, moved to Jamaica, and showed an independent streak early on. She ran away with pirate Jack Rackham, Calico Jack, dressed in men's clothes, and went to sea. Mary Read grew up in England and pretended to be a boy since childhood in order to receive her inheritance. She served in the army, then ended up on a ship captured by pirates. That's how she met and both participated in battles, fighting with sabers and pistols. Contemporaries wrote that they were fiercer than men. In 1720, Rackham's ship was captured by the British. Almost all the pirates hid in the hold, but Anne and Mary fought to the end. At the trial, both claimed to be pregnant, and the execution was postponed. Mary died in prison from illness and disappeared from the chronicles. Some say she was released and returned to her normal life. Others say she escaped and became a pirate again. The legacy of legends. Each of these people embodies different aspects of piracy. Morgan, how a pirate can become part of the state. Kidd, how a privateer can become a victim of politics. Wayne, a symbol of rebellion and defiance. And Mary, proof that even women in the harsh world of pirates could become legends. Their stories lived on in songs, books, and myths. They created the image of the romantic pirate that outlived the era itself. When the Caribbean was already teeming with buccaneers and corsairs, another arena of piracy was gaining momentum: the Indian Ocean. This vast region connected the richest markets of India, Persia, East Africa, and Indonesia. It was navigated by ships of the Mughal Empire, Arab dhows, Chinese junks, and Portuguese galleons. This meant riches that attracted adventurers from all over the world. The beginning of pirate raids. At the end of the 17th century, many European privateers, who had lost their licenses after peace treaties, were looking for new territories to plunder. The Atlantic and the Caribbean were becoming increasingly dangerous. The British and French fleets began a systematic hunt for pirates. And then they turned their attention to the east. Trade routes to India ran through the Cape of Good Hope and along the coast of Africa. Every caravan of ships carrying spices, silk, porcelain, gold, and silver became a tempting target. Thomas Tweed, the lucky pirate. One of the first famous pirates of the Indian Ocean was Thomas Tweed. An Englishman by birth, he obtained a privateering license in the 1690s, but quickly turned into an outright pirate. His first raid in 1693 became legendary. With one small ship and a few dozen men, he captured a huge Arab merchant ship loaded with gold, silver, and jewels. The loot was so great that each of his pirates received a share that allowed them to live like nobles for the rest of their lives. Two returned to America a hero. But instead of stopping there, he set sail for the Indian Ocean again. His second voyage proved fatal. He was killed in battle with Mughal warships. However, his name became a symbol of good luck, and his example inspired many others. Adam Baldridge and the First Pirate Republic in Madagascar. The island of Madagascar became an important base for pirates. Its remote bays and convenient location made it an ideal refuge. In the 1690s, English adventurer Adam Baldridge founded a real pirate colony on Isle Sainte Marie, a small island off the east coast of Madagascar. Dozens of captains settled here, using the island to repair ships, trade loot, and relax. Baldridge established trade with local chiefs. In exchange for weapons and European goods, pirates received food, slaves, and shelter. Gradually, Isle Sainte Marie became the legendary Pirate Eden. Henry Avery, King of Pirates. Another symbol was Henry Avery, or Avery, nicknamed Longbeard. His story shook the whole world. In 1695, he led a mutiny on the English warship Charles II, turning it into the pirate flagship Fancy. Avery led his crew to the Indian Ocean and soon carried out one of the most notorious raids in history. Off the coast of India, he intercepted a Mughal caravan, which included the ship Ganjai Sawai, a huge flagship with hundreds of soldiers and unimaginable riches. In a fierce battle, Avery's pirates captured the ship. The loot included gold, silver, jewels, and silk, worth millions of pounds by modern standards. Rumors of the raid shook Europe and Asia. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb demanded that England punish the pirates. A scandal erupted in London, and the East India Company's shares plummeted. England began its first global hunt for pirates. Avery disappeared. According to some sources, he died in poverty in England, while others claim that he managed to hide his treasures and lived to a ripe old age under a false name. His legend gave rise to hundreds of myths about treasures buried on the islands. Olivier Levasseur, the Eagle Pirate. French pirate Olivier Levasseur, nicknamed La Buse, the Eagle, became a symbol of late piracy in the Indian Ocean. In the 1720s, he captured the Portuguese galleon Virgin del Cabo, which was carrying untold riches, gold, silver, ivory statues, diamonds, and sacred relics. The loot was so enormous that the pirates divided it up over several weeks. Each received a share equal to the fortune of an entire nobleman. Levasseur continued to pirate until he was caught by the French. In 1730, he was hanged in Réunion. Before his execution, he threw an encrypted document into the crowd, a map to the treasure. Since then, Levasseur's treasure has been considered one of the most famous pirate treasures in history. People are still searching for it in Madagascar and the neighboring islands. Pirate Eden and its end. By the beginning of the 18th century, hundreds of pirates lived in Madagascar and the neighboring islands. They built houses here, married local women, and created mixed families. It was a unique world where European fugitives and African tribes lived side by side. But as in the Caribbean, the Free Republic could not exist forever. European powers tightened their control over trade routes, and the East India Company launched a hunt for pirates. Gradually, the pirate bases were destroyed, and the legend of the pirate paradise remained only in the chronicles. Conclusion: the Indian Ocean became the second arena of the Golden Age. Thomas Tew, Henry Avery, Olivier Levasseur. Their names are not as well known to the general public as Blackbeard or Morgan, but it was they who dealt the biggest blows to the trade routes of the East. Their stories are full of contrasts, from instant wealth to poverty and the gallows. But most importantly, they showed that piracy was a global phenomenon, spanning both the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. To understand why pirates were so feared and why they continue to capture the imagination, it is not enough to describe their raids and battles. It is important to take a look at their everyday world, the decks of ships, the holds, their camps in Tortuga or Nassau. It was a harsh and cruel world, but at the same time democratic and full of symbolism. Pirate ships. The ship was everything to a pirate: his home, his weapon, his fortress, and his booty. 1. Caravels and brigantines. Small, fast ships. Pirates appreciated them for their maneuverability. They could attack a galleon and escape pursuit. 2. Frigates. Medium-sized ships with dozens of cannons. They were a compromise between speed and firepower. Many famous captains, such as Blackbeard and Charles Vane, commanded frigates. 3. Galleons. Huge Spanish treasures on sails. They were loaded with gold and silver from America. For pirates, they were the jackpot, but also the main difficulty. Galleons were escorted by warships. Pirates rarely built their own ships, but rather captured them and adapted them to their needs. In the holds, excess bulkheads were removed to make room for the crew and booty. Flags and symbols. The most famous symbol was the Jolly Roger, a black flag with a skull and crossbones. But in reality, there were dozens of variations. Blackbeard's, a skull with an hourglass and a spear. In the case of One-Eyed Jack, a skull with crossed sabers. Bartholomew Roberts, a pirate standing on 2 skulls. Edward Law's, a red flag meaning no mercy. The flag was raised at the last moment, before the attack. It was a psychological weapon. Many captains surrendered just by seeing the skull and crossbones. Pirate weapons. 1. Bladed weapons. Swords, daggers, boarding axes. Light weapons were more convenient in hand-to-hand combat on deck. 2. Firearms. Pistols and muskets. Pirates carried several pistols on their belts, as it was impossible to reload them in combat. 3. Cannons. The main weapon at sea. But pirates rarely sought an artillery duel. Their goal was to board the ship. That is why they used shrapnel and chain shot to break masts and sails. The Pirate Code. Life on the ship was governed by a code. Examples. The booty was divided strictly into shares. The captain received 2 and the sailors 1. The loss of an arm or an eye was compensated with silver. A gambling was allowed off duty, but cheating could be punishable by death. Discipline in combat was absolute. The captain's orders were obeyed without question. These rules created a sense of justice. On a pirate ship, a former slave and a nobleman could stand side by side and receive the same share of the booty. Daily life. Unsanitary conditions and disease were rampant on ships. Scurvy, dysentery, and injuries were constant companions. Food consisted of biscuits, salted meat, and water mixed with rum. At the same time, pirates valued freedom. On land, They organized banquets and spent their booty in the taverns of Port Royal or Nassau. Life could end at any moment, so they lived for the here and now. Pirate myths. 1. Treasures. The reality was different. Pirates rarely buried treasure. They spent their loot immediately on rum and entertainment. But legends about treasure persisted thanks to the stories of Captain Kidd and Levasseur. 2. Parrots, wooden legs, and eye patches. There is some truth to this. Pirates did keep parrots as exotic pets, and due to frequent injuries, many lost limbs or eyes. But the romantic image was formed later in books and theater. 3. Cursed treasures. Many believe that the gold of the Aztecs and Incas was cursed. Superstitions were an important part of the pirate world. There were often sorcerers or sailors who could tell the future by the stars on ships. Pirates and slaves. Piracy was closely linked to the slave trade. Some pirates robbed slave traders and freed the slaves. Others, on the contrary, sold the people they captured. In Madagascar, pirates often formed families with African women, and mixed settlements emerged. The cultural legacy. The world of pirates was a unique blend of freedom and terror. They created their own laws, defied empires, and lived intensely but briefly. Their culture became part of global memory. Rum, skulls, chests of gold, flags. All of this emerged from the reality of the 17th and 18th centuries. By the beginning of the 18th century, the oceans had changed. What had recently seemed like a free land where any daredevil could become rich was now turning into a field of strict control by empires. Spain was strengthening its fortresses, England and France were rebuilding their colonies, and Holland dominated trade. There was less and less room for pirates. The attack on Nassau. Nassau in the Bahamas, Pirate Republic, was a symbol of freedom. Hundreds of captains were based here, and booty from all the seas flowed here. The pirates elected their own rulers, made decisions in councils, and no empire dictated terms to them. But in 1718, an English squadron under the command of Woodes Rogers entered the port. He offered amnesty. Those who surrendered would be forgiven. Those who refused would be hanged. Many surrendered. Others went to sea. Rogers turned Nassau into a colonial city. Freedom disappeared. It was the first major blow to the Golden Age. The fates of the captains. Blackbeard was killed in 1718 off the coast of Carolina. His body, riddled with bullets and saber wounds, became a symbol of the end of the legend. Charles Vane, who refused amnesty, was captured and hanged in 1721. His death meant that even the most daring rebels could not escape the noose. Calico Jack fell victim to British patrols in 1720. His comrades in Bonnie and Mary Read remained legends, but he himself ended up on the gallows. William Kidd, even earlier, became a symbol of how the state betrayed its own privateers. His hanged body hung on the banks of the Thames for decades. One by one, pirates faded into the past. Bartholomew Roberts, the last king. But there was still one left, Bartholomew Roberts, nicknamed Black Bart. He appeared on the scene in 1719 and quickly became the most formidable pirate of his generation. Roberts was not just a robber. He was a talented strategist, an excellent sailor, and a charismatic leader. His crew called him the King of Pirates. In 3 years, he captured more than 400 ships, a record that no one has been able to beat. His fleet terrorized the Atlantic from the Caribbean to the coast of Africa. Roberts imposed strict discipline. His code prohibited gambling on board, drunkenness, and quarrels. His pirate ship was more like a military vessel, but his end was inevitable. In February 1722, off the coast of Africa, the English warship Swarm caught up with Roberts. In a fierce battle, a bullet pierced his throat. His body was thrown overboard so that it would not fall into the hands of his enemies. With his death, the era of pirates effectively came to an end. Empires take over. After the 1720s, piracy ceased to be a widespread phenomenon. The English and French fleets patrolled the Atlantic, caravans became better organized, and colonial power grew stronger. Now the oceans belonged to the empires. Pirates remained only in rare chronicles, legends, and popular memory. Legacy. The Golden Age of Piracy did not last long, about half a century, but it left a huge mark. Romance. Black flags, chests of gold, treasure maps, parrots on shoulders. All of this became part of world culture. Mythology. Legends about the treasures of Kidd or Levasseur still attract adventure seekers. Freedom. The ideas of equality and democracy were born on pirate ships. For many, it was their first experience of a society where everyone had a voice. Fear. For empires, pirates were a reminder that even the strongest fleets are vulnerable when faced with audacity and the sea. The Caribbean sun set over the ruins of Port Royal and the quiet bays of Nassau. Black sails disappeared from the horizon, replaced by the flags of empires. But the memory of pirate freedom did not die. Today, 3 centuries later, pirate stories live on in books, films, and legends. Blackbeard and Henry Morgan, and Bonnie and Bartholomew Roberts. They are still with us as symbols of freedom and rebellion against authority. The Golden Age of Piracy was short but bright. It left a mark that neither the gallows nor the cannons of empires could erase. And perhaps somewhere deep in a tropical island, there is still a chest of coins waiting for its new owner.